on the area of climate change and absorbing CO2 through the environment for architecture. I'd be interested in the other panelists' views on the way in which, not so much climate change, but the way in which we deal with climate change, for example, cutting electricity consumption, whether that has an impact on whether it's the singularity or our ability to do things with computing, and what the implications are for transhumanism. Anyone want to take that?
Okay, well, as the global warming skeptic, I have serious doubts about the projections. Again, I'm talking a bit about projections. I see some problems with projections as well. But I think wherever you think about confidence in future projections, I think what we should be looking for, I think we probably all agree on this, is technologies that will, if there is a problem with global warming, will help that, but will also remove dependence on external.
I was actually thinking more from the point of view of, irrespective of whether you're a skeptic or not, you're unlikely to be sceptical about the laws that may or may not be enacted. And so I'm wondering whether there is a risk, in terms of you were talking about defeaters before, that the laws may have unfortunate side effects on, say, the technology industry, which means we don't get to where we need to go.
Well, as I was about to say, really, I think that shouldn't be a problem as long as we can try to encourage agreement on the technologies that will solve problems to the extent that they are real problems, I think rather than the central controlling problem, we want to be, if anything, subsidizing technologies or encouraging more research into technologies that will solve those problems while not really requiring restriction on people. For instance, I'm in favour of more nuclear power and have been for a long time. I don't think that would help technology advance because we keep costs low as long as we reduce some of the restrictions on that. So I don't think there should be a problem with that. But yeah, if we have central controlling restrictions on our use of carbon, then that could be a major slowdown in technological progress. I think it could cause real economic problems, but that's not really necessary.
One of my concerns is, of course, the problem of cognitive bias. How can we actually think about uncertain predictions and so on? And in general, the outlook is, well, it's pretty tricky to do that, and we know that we're very overconfident. But we can look for robust strategies, and I think that is useful. Regardless of what, how it is with the anthropogenic part, it's pretty clear that we ought to do something about the climate anyway. It's probably a good safeguard. I'm not trusting this integration to last that much longer. And an ice age is just as bad as global warming. So I think the interesting thing is, like carbon sequestration, that's a really useful technology for a lot of things. You can use it for fixing the climate, but you can also fix Venice. And I think we should be looking at what works for a lot of domains. For example, saving energy, that's really useful. Being better at telecommuting, well, that would save both the environment and a lot of time.
Okay.
From a tactical point of view, I also think that it might be interesting, from our point of view as technophiles, to encourage and push technological solutions to the problem. While I'm also ambivalent about global warming, but whichever way the climate is actually going, it is always obviously one of our goals to increase our control over it. And by pushing certain technologies, such as the one in the latest presentation, perhaps a few years down the line, we can both achieve both objectives.
Yeah, I've got just a I believe in the speciation of technology. I think one of the problems of the 20th century has been these kind of singularity scale solutions and problems. We kind of identify the one thing that's wrong about the world and kind of direct all our thinking towards that. And that's why we've got so many geneticists and not many artificial chemists, complex chemists, because biotechnology's got more. I believe in speciation about kind of opening up portfolios for technology. I think we're undergoing a renaissance. I think that we're starting to see expansive synthetic forms of knowledge rather than reductionist, kind of super specialist and singularity-led, either doomsday scenarios or kind of cure-alls to the world. world. So this kind of, I guess my head's a little bit embedded in complexity itself and kind of encouraging kind of diversity. And hopefully we won't get huge build-up of toxic gases because we'll all be using slightly different technologies.
Thank you. There's a question just behind the projector from me.
Hi, thanks for all the talks, very, very interesting. Relating to your point about a bottom-up approach, Rachel, looking at creating cells from the bottom up, you said earlier that you're not interested in including DNA or necessarily purely biological entities within your research. Is that driven by a sort of reluctance to combine the bottom-up approach with biology for ethical reasons?
No, it's because there are bigger experts in the world doing it.
The second question, which I find interesting relates to Anders, what is your opinion on the challenges faced by industry and the engineering community in bringing biology concepts into engineering? Do you think there's a general sort of resistance to that? And how do you think we can combat that going forward?
Can I just as quickly, with the bottom-up approach, essentially I don't think we've actually looked at the natural history of self-assembling chemistries to a point where we actually understand where they properly intersect with the complexity of biological bits and pieces that we know today. So I personally think it's premature to be kind of throwing RNA into little fatty envelopes. And like I'm saying, there are experts in the world already doing that. So I'm interested in kind of looking at the natural history of self-assembling chemical systems that was being so marvellously explored in the 19th century.
Thank you.
I think one of the problems is we don't understand self-assembly and complexity very much. We have very little experience so far with that. And that makes it hard to do good engineering. The engineering systems are usually based on modularity. They're supposed to, at least the parts, should be understandable by humans. We're not much less good at building a whole system, but we have an emergent property that is very useful. Occasionally we succeed tremendously, like the internet. But quite often we don't know why we succeeded so well with the internet, while other solutions seem to have failed. So I think one challenge is that we don't have the understanding yet, but we can get that by getting more experience. But there is also a difference in mindset. Many engineers I know are very fond of, well, there is a problem, there must be a solution, and it must be somewhat straightforward. Perhaps an interesting, complex solution, but at least there has to be a solution. But many biological systems are not solutions so much as the result of a complex process. They just happen to be. Broccoli is not the answer to any particular question. It just happened to be, and it happens to be a pretty delicious, in my opinion, and quite successful solution. Similarly, the beetles I collected were also solutions, but not to any particular question. So I think the challenge here is engineering aims at a particular goal. And it might be that biology, or synthetic biology, might be rather tricky to coax into getting to a particular goal.
Right.
Any other questions?
Thanks. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. Italian chap? Very good to have you here. As someone who appears to have quite a holistic view of the transhumanist movement, is there any particular speaker or concept you would have liked to see present at this conference today at the Business Center?
Or you mean in general, or for continental Europe, or
At all?
well, like Kurzweil is always interesting, but I guess it's not as easy to get hold of a little bit. No, I think we have a pretty good selection here, actually. I was thinking about this conference actually the other day, and how successful and it is in terms of public. You must consider that we were running meetings and presentations in the same building, but in much smaller rooms only a few years ago. But I lost my mind. But the point is that having so many people here, it's a massive going to the next level. Okay, and I was thinking about this conference.